The silence had become a heavy cloak, woven thread by thread from years of unspoken words and unaddressed wounds. Elara carried it everywhere, a constant, chilling weight that settled deep in her bones. It had been nearly 7 years since she'd truly spoken to Lyra. 7 years since their once vibrant connection had frayed and snapped, leaving behind a raw, aching void. There was a time, not so long ago, when their lives had been inextricably intertwined, a tapestry of shared laughter, whispered secrets, and an understanding that ran deeper than blood. Now, only the phantom threads remained, clinging to her heart, sharp and almost unbearable in their absence. She often found herself tracing the outlines of old photographs, her thumb brushing over Lyra's face, eyes sparkling with mischief, a smile that could light up a room. They were so young then, so full of an unshakable certainty that nothing could ever come between them. But time, as it always does, had proven them wrong. It wasn't a single, cataclysmic event that had driven them apart, but a slow, insidious erosion of trust. A series of misunderstandings left to fester, like thorns burrowing deeper with each passing season. A carelessly spoken word here, a perceived slight there, a growing chasm of unspoken resentments that eventually became too wide to bridge. Elara remembered the last conversation, if one could even call it that. It was clipped, cold, devoid of the warmth that had always been their hallmark. She'd hung up the phone that day, her hand trembling, and a part of her soul felt like it had shattered, scattering into a million irreparable pieces. In the years that followed, she tried to fill the void. She poured herself into her work as a graphic designer, losing herself in the meticulous lines and vibrant colors of digital canvases. She cultivated new friendships, bright and shiny, but they never quite reached the depth of what she'd lost. There was always a barrier, a protective wall she'd subconsciously built around the most vulnerable part of her heart. Afraid of another fracture, she'd convinced herself that it was simply how life went sometimes, that people grew apart, that some loves, even the most cherished ones, were simply not meant to endure. It was a self-preservation mechanism, a way to numb the persistent ache, to move forward without constantly looking back at the wreckage. Yet every birthday, every holiday, every quiet moment of reflection, Lyra's absence was a palpable thing, a shadow stretching long and cold across her days. Elara would sometimes catch a glimpse of someone who resembled her sister in a crowd, a certain tilt of the head, a specific way of laughing, and her breath would hitch a wave of bittersweet longing washing over her. She would quickly look away, reinforcing the belief that the past was just that. Past. One Tuesday evening, the sky outside her apartment window a bruised purple, Elara was curled on her sofa, lost in the pages of an old novel. The apartment was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. It was a familiar, almost comforting solitude. Then, her phone, resting on the coffee table, buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting a work email notification, perhaps a text from a friend. But the name that bloomed on the display sent a jolt through her, making her heart leap into her throat. Lyra. Her first instinct was to ignore it. What could Lyra possibly want? After all this time, after all the silence, what could be said? The fear of reopening old wounds, of hearing a voice that held so much history, was overwhelming. She stared at the vibrating device, her hand hovering, a battle raging within her. The phone buzzed again. Then again. It was persistent. A strange, almost magnetic pull tugged at her, a whisper of hope she hadn't realized still lived within her. With a deep, trembling breath, she answered. "Hello." Her voice was a bare whisper, barely audible even to her own ears. There was a pause on the other end, a breath held. Then Lyra's voice, hesitant, fragile, yet unmistakably hers. "Elara, It's Lyra. The simple statement, so utterly obvious, still landed with the force of a physical blow. Elara closed her eyes, a sudden warmth stinging them. "I know," she managed, her voice still thin. I hope I'm not bothering you," Lyra continued, her voice gaining a fraction of its old rhythm, yet still laced with an unfamiliar fragility. I've been thinking about you a lot lately." Ilara's mind raced, searching for the right words, for any words. She felt herself nodding, though Lyra couldn't see her. "Me too," she admitted, the truth surprising even herself. It was the first honest thing she'd said about Lyra in years. Then, the floodgates began to open. Slowly, tentatively. They didn't dive into the past. Not at first. They spoke of mundane things, of their lives now, the years that had passed. Lyra talked about her new job in a different city, the small apartment she'd decorated with too many plants. Elara shared anecdotes about her rescue cat, Miko, and her latest artistic projects. There was a cautious circling, a testing of the waters, but beneath the surface, an undeniable current began to pull them back together. It was when Lyra mentioned a childhood memory, a specific, silly inside joke only they understood, about a misadventure at their grandmother's house involving a runaway pie, that the dam truly broke. A small, involuntary laugh escaped Ilara's lips, a sound she hadn't realized was missing until it filled the quiet room. Lyra laughed too, a sound full and rich, just as Ilara remembered it. In that shared laughter, the years of silence began to dissipate, like mist burning off in the morning sun. "I miss you, Ilara," Lyra said suddenly, her voice thick with emotion. "I miss us." Ilara's own tears, long held back, finally spilled. "I miss you too, Lyra, so much." They talked for hours that night, long past when Ilara usually went to sleep. They didn't hash out all the old hurts, not in a single conversation, but they acknowledged them. They spoke of the misunderstandings, the pain they had both carried, the regret. It wasn't about blame. It was about shared sorrow and a mutual yearning for what had been lost. Lyra admitted her own stubbornness, her fear of reaching out first. Ilara confessed how deeply she'd believed their bond was irreparably shattered, how that belief had kept her from trying harder. There was a quiet, profound understanding that bloomed in the space between their words, a healing balm over old wounds. The conversation was not a sudden fix, but an unraveling, a gentle untangling of threads that had become impossibly knotted. By the time they finally hung up, the night sky had lightened to a pre-dawn gray. Ilara didn't feel tired. She felt an exquisite lightness, as if a monumental weight had been lifted from her chest. The quiet of her apartment was different now. It wasn't empty. It felt infused with a renewed sense of possibility, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. In the weeks and months that followed, the phone calls became more frequent, then video calls, then a tentative plan to meet. When Ilara finally saw Lyra again, standing at the arrivals gate at the airport, her heart swelled with a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes once more. There was a moment of awkwardness, a slight hesitation, before they rushed into each other's arms. The embrace was tight, fierce, filled with the unspoken language of sisters. It was a connection that had deepened, paradoxically, through its absence, refined by the pain of separation into something stronger, more resilient. They had both grown, changed, navigated their own journeys in the silence, and now they stood before each other not as the girls who had fractured, but as women who had learned the profound, humbling lesson of forgiveness and the enduring power of unconditional love. Their love wasn't broken, it had merely been waiting, quietly, patiently, for the call that would bring them home to each other forever.